Beside me here is German member of the European Parliament, Christine Anderson, who's far from forgotten the power the World Health Organization garnered over the last few years. And her and 4 other MEPs have helped spearhead an initiative seeking to expose any political powers across the world who are trying to give the WHO more power.
We are here today to tell you, WHO globalitarian misanthropists, we are here today to tell you, you picked this fight, you wanted this fight, well, guess what? You've got it. Let's fight.
I gotta say, I'm surprised to see you back in Canada after you were demonized by state media and politicians as some sort of Nazi, but welcome back on Rebel News.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, before we talk about this ECI and why it's important even for Canadians to be aware of in this initiative, I have to ask you this. What was going through your mind when you saw that a literal Nazi veteran got a standing ovation in Canada's House of Commons after you retreated that way?
Well, to be honest, I thought it was hilarious, and I spent a good portion of the day literally on the floor, rolling and laughing. Obviously, if he fought the Russians in World War II, that can only mean one thing. Yeah, he was fighting with the Nazis, and I was like, "This is not happening. Are they really not realizing?" So, yeah, people, if you don't know your history, you make mistakes like that. And I thought it was particularly hilarious, especially after I had been labeled a Nazi and 3 members of Parliament had been crucified and demonized for having had lunch with me.
Now, for those who are not sure what the European Citizen Initiative is and the one that pertains to freedom and trust, tell us a little bit about what that is.
Okay, so first of all, there is such an instrument. It's called the European Citizens Initiative. It's a procedure that enables or should allow citizens to come up with, a particular reason they would want the EU Commission to act on. And however, the hurdles and the thresholds you have to take are pretty high. But nevertheless, there were 7 brave citizens, and they were determined to launch such an initiative. And it is, in effect, fighting the attempt of the WHO to, go on a power grab throughout the world, especially in the Western democracies, which would allow them to seize government powers in case of a pandemic, which they are in charge of calling out, right? So whenever they decide it's a pandemic now, they would automatically seize governing powers in the member states, which is has nothing to do with democracy, because WHO is not elected by anyone. On the contrary, the rich of the super rich buy their way in via donations. And these are going to be the people that get to tell you when you can leave your house and when you have to take an mRNA shot and, have to have a COVID pass or whatever they come up with. Because an unelected body like WHO, who is controlled and run by multi-billionaires, should never be allowed to act in place of a democratically elected government.
And of particular concern on this initiative are the treaties that the World Health Organization has proposed. And you are currently, I'm catching you just before your first stop on your North American tour, the Make It Your Business tour. So why should people watching make it their business to know more about these treaties? What is most problematic about them?
Well, they should make it their business because it's going to be their business, and it's going to affect each and every citizen in all of the WHO member states. What it boils down to is pretty much WHO will be put in the position of seizing the governing powers, and they will determine, like I said, when there is a pandemic and how you can behave, what you can do, how many of your fundamental rights you will be able to exercise, or if they are going to be taken away altogether. And the thing is, you will not have any repercussions. What are you going to do about it? You cannot run them out of office because you never elected them. And what it will do, however, it will provide a plausible deniability for the elected officials, because they're not going to be the ones making those decisions anymore. And they can always say, well, we would have never done that. We would not have infringed upon your rights. It was WHO. So the citizen they have no repercussions. There is no recourse they can take. They will be exposed. Each and every one of them by name. Because guess what? There's elections coming up, and the people might be interested in who is responsible for the abolition of democracy.
In Canada, we had something called the National Citizens Inquiry. We covered that extensively at Rebel News, and it exposed many uncovered truths about what was happening during things like COVID lockdowns. But it didn't reach to the masses in the sense that unless you were in the know, following news like Rebel News, you didn't find it. You, or I should say, the team of people behind this initiative have recently had a win about how far this can go as of now. Tell us about that.
So EU Commission has now decided, or found no way around it, let me put it this way. They have found no way to not accept that European Citizens Initiative. So it was submitted, they had to accept it, which they did. And the process is now moving along. There should be a conference in December. And then we have to, take to the streets and collect signatures. We will need 1 million signatures, and they have to be, I think, from 7 different countries, and a certain threshold has to be met in each of the countries. These 7 citizens are so incredibly brave because they stand up against this despicable attempts by the globalitarian misanthropists to strip us of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. They simply say no to the attempts of granting an unelected body governing powers. They simply say no. And that's what we all should do, because this will end if we simply say no. And that's what we're here to do today.
Well, is Canada one of those countries that will be needing signatures? And either way, where can people go to find out more about this initiative?
Well, these signatures have to be collected within the member states of EU, since it's a European Citizens Initiative. So, but I think there is a process actually that people from outside EU can sign as well, but they would not be counted towards the validity of that initiative. But but still, we're moving it along, and we are going there. What you mentioned earlier was the national inquiry that you guys had here, and unfortunately, as you rightly said, unless you were watching Rebel News or unless you were, getting your information from alternative media outlets, you would not have heard about it. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing everywhere. And even the official special committee within EU Parliament, despite the fact of everything that we uncovered, despite all the lies that we exposed, and despite all the fake news they actually had to admit to that they were spreading fake news, it didn't seem to make a difference, because in the report that was drafted at the end of that committee, every single lie is being repeated in it. So the narrative seems to hold very strong, their narrative, but there is so many holes in it by now. I think the people on the street, the everyday citizen, they no longer buy into it, and that's the big win here.
Well, we'll be following closely, hopefully more wins to come. Drea Humphrey for Rebel News and MEP Christine Anderson.
Thank you so much.
You can find out more about the initiative you just heard Ms. Anderson speak on by clicking on the link for the written report to this article in the description box below. But Rebel News has a way for you to take immediate action against these treaties. Go to exposethewho.com and sign our petition demanding that our elected officials in Canada keep our health decisions local and decentralized. Go to exposethewho.com.